Good morning, seventh grade. Welcome. My name is Meriwether Lewis. I'm here to share with you some great information that I have found on my exploration with my great friend, William Clark. We here have information to share with you on our great explorations of the Louisiana Purchase. I'm just kidding, seven. This is Mr. A. Wellness Soul Studies. Great information for you to continue to explore. I'll leave on my great Lewis and Clark Explorer jacket because we are on a great exploration to continue our knowledge on our current unit. Hop on board and let's travel. We will now begin on our continuation of a great exploration of history. Where are we, seventh? We're right in the middle of the War of 1812. So, who is president? Let's ask our great friend, Lewis. Meriwether Lewis, right? So he will go ahead and, of course, tell you that we now have James Madison as the number 4 commander-in-chief. Let's hop on board and let's continue exactly where we left off. So, what was the Battle of Thames on the left-hand side, please? What was the Battle of Thames? This is October 5th of 1813, okay? So what we can do is continue on the notes from last time. If you would rather go ahead, print a note sheet, have an extra one, absolutely good to go, guys. Just keep the questions on the left. There are some individuals who like to type these assignments. What I ask you to do is when you type them, please put them in a category. Question on top, info, info, info. New question on top, info, 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 and continue. Okay, here's what we need to know. Number one big point that I want you to realize before we continue anything, before you write down anything, I want you to think about how Jefferson treated the natives, right? I began the video today dressed as one of our great friends, Meriwether Lewis, because I wanted you to remember how Lewis and Clark and all their explorers, right, on board were told. What they were told how to act here, right? How they were told. So what they were told and what they were ordered by Thomas Jefferson was to treat the natives with great respect. In turn, right? Of course, they wanted to do so, treat them with respect. But what's in it for them? In turn, they knew that the natives would go ahead and be a great resource. Be a great resource to the land because nobody knew the land better than them. All of a sudden now, you're going to see in history, in the units to come, a different approach towards the natives. Well, in this unit right now, we see the natives, the Indians, right, aligned with the British. So let's dive into the battle now that we've reviewed that, summed up that great treatment under Jefferson. It was ordered by Jefferson. Battle of Thames, October 5th of 1813. General Harrison, William Henry Harrison, right, future president. He'll actually be the first president to die in office, but we don't need to know that yet. Just can keep that in the back of your mind. William Henry Harrison had been pursuing, looking for the British and Indian forces, and he eventually catches up with them on the Thames River, okay, on the Thames River. Moravian Town on the Thames River specifically, okay, reinforced by troops sent by Perry. You may remember from the other day, okay? So reinforcement, additional troops, additional, arms to have the troops armed. They break through initial Indian resistance. So what's happening here, and you can even see on the right-hand side, all of a sudden you have Harrison and his men. Remember the militia we talked about the other day. They're able to break through the initial Indian resistance. Harrison engaged a larger group of British regulars and Indians. So what's happening is they're fighting against the British, fighting against the Indians, the natives who are on the same side. British regulars, you may remember from earlier units, even the American Revolution, where you have these individuals, citizens from Britain who are here to help their country in time of need where they need additional troops. So these are British regulars, these are the natives working together. Americans eventually are able to break through the British lines. So what the Americans are doing here, first through the natives, right? First through the Indians, breaking through the resistance. Then they engage in a large group of British regulars and Indians, and eventually the Americans break through the British lines. British cannon failed to fire and they retreated. So the British obviously had an issue. The cannon didn't fire. And why is that an issue? Because they did not have the necessary ammo they were planning to use to take down the U.S. to continue, the Americans to continue to move forward here. Tecumseh, a great individual in the sense of knowledge of the area, of the territory, knowledge of the land, and also knowledge of the other Indians. Well-respected leader, so to say. His men, stay with him because they trust him. They know his goal is to lead them in the right direction for the betterment of the natives. Well, Tecumseh and his men are going to continue to pursue this fight. They're not going to go down without coming up with a fight. Tecumseh and his men, they both, they all stay there, the men that survive up to that point. And there's a clip here that you're going to reflect on after in the post, and you're going to see this in great detail. So use this knowledge, and then I'd like you to watch the recreation clip, because obviously there's no actual clip from the time, but there's a recreation of it. So it's a very fierce back and forth battle. Eventually, as you see here in this primary source, which is an illustration from the time period, Tecumseh is killed during the battle. Tecumseh, this great leader that the natives really trusted so well that the British really relied on, all of a sudden is killed during this battle. And it shocks many individuals. It shocks the natives. It shocks the British. The remainder of the Indian forces who were there, they dissolve. They run away. They realize what just happened. Okay? They realize they have lost a critical person, a critical leader who could have helped them continue to pursue and push forward. So the natives who were there scatter, and Tecumseh is dead. So this all the information that we've covered now and last time as well is all the northern front. We're now going to pursue forward. You can even put a line if you want to and write eastern front. We're now going to pursue forward into the eastern front. Take a moment, jot anything down, and let me know if you have any questions. But remember, there's a video on this later. So the Redcoats, right? We heard about them earlier this year. Here we have them again. Here come the Redcoats. We've heard that before. So the Eastern Front. What happened in 1884 on the left, please? What happened in 1884? In parentheses, you can put Eastern Front. You can put here come the Redcoats. Any of that would be beneficial. Britain defeats Napoleon in 1814. You remember Napoleon, right? His ties with France. Napoleon is a big reason why Thomas Jefferson was able to acquire the Louisiana Purchase from France. Why Lewis and Clark were even able to explore it was because of that purchase. But Britain defeats Napoleon in 1814 and freeing up the rest of their army for an American attack. So they're able to free up the rest of their army for an American attack. So Britain is preparing to have a strong attack against the Americans. Britain is going to land in Chesapeake Bay and march towards Washington, D.C. So the Britons are going to land in Chesapeake Bay and march on foot towards Washington, D.C. 6,500 American militia, okay, under William Winder, 6,500, meet up with 4,500, so 2,000 less, okay, British, 6 miles outside the city of Bladensburg. So they're going to meet 4,500 British, and you have 6,000 500 Americans. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to pursue forward. What's MD stand for? Hopefully you know that that's Maryland, not too far from the territory of Washington, D.C. So all of a sudden, you're going to see action. A lot of action is going to occur right now. And a lot of history here is going to occur, okay? Because Washington, obviously we know it's the United States capital. We know the White House is located there. We know the president is there, has been there since John Adams' administration. Remember, Adams was the first president to live in the White House. So what were the Bladensburg races on the left-hand side? What were the Bladensburg races? Okay, so August 24th, 1814. Now in 1814, Redcoats are coming, British are coming again, right? They're not only coming, they're here. So these are seasoned Redcoats, meaning they're well experienced, they are veterans. They're veteran Redcoats, really experienced, ready for battle, seasoned, right? They're under General Robert Ross, and they cut through an inexperienced line of militia. Here you have a group of seasoned, experienced men, Redcoats for the British. They're able to go right through an inexperienced line of militiamen. These militiamen, right, the Americans, are called up to serve, but they don't have the amount of experience that the British have. All of a sudden, you're going to realize something's going on here, right? You have a group of well-experienced, and you have a group that's really not experienced for this type of battle, right? It's like putting up, it's like in a basketball game, right? We might have our friend Mason. He's really experienced. He's a seasoned individual, seasoned basketball player. And then let's say our friend Santiago, he hasn't played in many years, and he's not as experienced as our great friend Mason. So what's going to happen in the game is Mason may have a greater advantage than our friend Santiago. Hopefully they don't mind using them as the example, right? We appreciate that. So the American retreat was so fast that the battle became known as the Bladensburg races, right? Let's say if Megan and Kelly, they race, right? What are they doing? They're running at full force, full speed. So they're racing on the backfield. Well, the Americans retreat so fast that it's almost a race. They're gone. Why are they going to go away? Well, here's what they've realized. The British, the experienced British, are ready to keep pushing forward. If they did not race out of the way, what could have happened? What could have happened was you would have had a great either massacre or a great number of Americans dead, because they realized they have to go ahead and come up with a better and more efficient plan. What does this cause? So now the Bladensburg races, they're racing out of the way. This causes the British to keep moving forward. They're continuing to push forward. Where are they going? They're going to Washington, D.C. Who's in Washington, D.C.? Of course, the nation's government and the president himself, Madison. So the government is concerned. The British are coming. They're not sure exactly what, they kind of have a feeling what they're going to do, but they're not 100% sure. So the government evacuates the city. So for protection, the government evacuates the city. Dolly Madison, James Madison's wife, the first lady at the time, she remains in the White House, and she plays a great part in history, great individual. This first lady is known for a lot here, but she's really known for saving a big part of history. She's concerned with the amount of history that's in the White House. So what is she going to do? She's going to save as much as she can, because she's afraid that they may take down this White House. They may go ahead. Who knows what they're going to do? But she feels there's a lot of values there, a lot of valuables there. There's a lot of history there, even though it's not as anywhere near as old. Because remember, it opened around 1800. Not anywhere as near as old as where it is now. The amount of history that it has now. But she knew it was valuable. There's a great painting of George Washington that she's going to save. She's known for saving the portrait of George Washington. And if you Google it, you can take a look at the original as well, which we still have today. One of the most famous portraits of Washington. she will save. And she's known for that. Why? Because she wants to, of course, save the history of this great general and this great former commander-in-chief. So what is the burning of Washington on the left, or how do the British burn Washington on the left? So the British march onto Washington and they burn the city, the Library of Congress, the Capitol building, the White House. You may not know this, but there's marks on the White House today from the War of 1812. There's some bullet holes there that are still there today, and they're left as a reminder of this war. So they're going to go ahead and they're going to burn key buildings to the U.S. government. There's no official American resistance that's taking place. A hurricane and tornado swept through the Capitol that night. Well, when you think of this, it's pretty incredible, okay? Because what could have happened if it didn't? So a hurricane or a tornado actually goes through the nation's capital, through Washington that night. Through all that wind and force and rain, you have the flames gone, and it's ravaging the British. The British didn't expect this. And that puts down this burning. A lot of damage is done. But if you look at how God looked out for us at that time, is that this hurricane and tornado swept through to save a lot more, and of course, lives and buildings in the United States here that we're talking about that is just being ravaged. So what could have happened? Only God would know that. And of course, that was put out through this hurricane and tornado. But the White House would suffer severe damage, and a lot of history would have been lost. The George Washington painting that I'm speaking of actually has some burn marks as well that went ahead and is still that way. Individuals in history can always look up to Dolly Madison for going ahead and saving the portrait. And I'm going to go ahead and try to pull it up here for you to see. Many of you may know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's take a look here. So Dolly Madison saving George Washington, first commander-in-chief's portrait in the White House. So we'll take a look for a moment on what this is. But we can see that the United States, the Americans, were not truly fully prepared for what happened, which is why there's no U.S. resistance at the time. So you have Dolly Madison quickly realizing that she needs to come to the rescue and save history here. So she saves George Washington's portrait, which would have been burnt to the ground from the British. So I'll pull that up in a moment here. But it's a crucial moment in history for you to know if you didn't know that this happened before. So the following is the portrait of George Washington. It's actually found in the National Archives. Great tribute. Here it is in the National Archives. And she's able to save this portrait here. There's other portraits that, you look at the photograph here of the White House in flames. It's pretty incredible to see what they did. And you have these individuals scattering. We'll have a clip in a couple of days where you could see this on a greater level. But the portrait was once in the White House, now in the National Gallery for the Smithsonian. If you're ever in D.C., you could check that out. Pretty cool to see. Incredible piece. You could see it takes up a big part of the wall there. So she wanted to save that portrait. So what you notice here is they're capturing and they're burning Washington. You can see the White House in the background on fire. You can see all the amount of troops. And the sheer chaos is incredible to realize. So the British are able to march that close to cause this great devastation. But the British are not done yet. If you remember, I mentioned Maryland before. Well, let's go back to Maryland right now. Baltimore, Maryland specifically. What is the Battle of Baltimore on the left-hand side? So we can discuss. So the British, after they burn Washington here, D.C., they're going to march south to Baltimore. and they've planned a 2-day long attack. They want to land attack, right? Their attack of the land would be from the north, and they would attack the sea from the south. So they'd have both areas covered, okay? Attack the land from the north, attack the sea from the south. So both areas are covered. On September 12th, the British general Robert Ross, he arrives on the outskirts of town and began to push into the city. So coming and pushing into the city of Baltimore. Arrive on the outskirts, that means the outside, pretty close by. And he's going to push into the city. The initial British advancement was halted when Ross was killed by an American sharpshooter. So an American sharpshooter is able to kill General Robert Ross from Britain. Unexpected at all from the British. So he's killed. So that's going to obviously shock a lot of the British troops here. And that's going to stall them for a moment. That sheer devastation is going to stall them for a moment because this great general who has helped them so much so far is stopped in his tracks. And this time, you can see that the Americans seem to be on their game. The Americans all of a sudden realize what they need to do to win. The last thing they want to do is act the way they have recently. And, the other time they'd run away, it makes them look really weak. So the Americans had superior numbers. They realized the number of troops that they need here. And they're well prepared. So they have a greater number of supplies, greater number of experienced individuals. The British do halt their advancement. So they're not going to continue to move forward. They're going to stop for a moment. And they're going to wait for the results of the battles that are going to take place at sea. Because they're going to attack the sea from the south and the land from the north. So British are going to halt for a moment. And a lot of that has to do with the general dying from a sharpshooter. And then all of a sudden, the American numbers are larger and they're more prepared than ever before in the sense of right now during the battles of this war. Okay, Baltimore was protected to the south by Fort McHenry. Okay, Baltimore is protected to the south by Fort McHenry. Fort McHenry is right here. You can see the American flags that symbolize that. So they're protected from the south by Fort McHenry. So I'm sure many of you are not aware of what Fort McHenry is and was. So let's focus in on what it is and what it was. What is Fort McHenry on the left-hand side, please? What is Fort McHenry on the left-hand side? Well, before you do, if we were in class right now, I'd say, what do you see on the left? Well, what do you see? You see a fort. What does a fort do? A fort is to protect, right, your territory. Many of you were younger, right? Let's say when Jessica was younger, maybe she built a little fort. Maybe she built a little fort made out of pillows or boxes or books, and all of a sudden, and then Jessica's in the middle. Well, she's putting up all this or sheets, right? Some of you may have done this when you were little because you're protecting yourself. This is your fort, and you're protecting your territory. Or you may have a little friend that have done that before, right? So Baltimore was protected to the south by Fort McHenry. The Americans had sunk old merchant ships at the mouth of the harbor to prevent ships from advancing towards Baltimore. So the Americans, realizing what the British could do here, they sink old merchant ships, right, for trade at the mouth, right at the mouth, the opening of the harbor. And they do so because they want to prevent the British ships from advancing towards Baltimore. They want to stop them in their tracks. So 1,000 Americans are held at Fort McHenry. 19 British ships under Arthur Brooks start to advance. So they're coming closer and closer and closer towards this fort, right, towards Fort McHenry. They began trading cannon fire and mortar fire with Americans. What that means is cannon fire back and forth, right? British to the Americans, Americans to the British, back and forth, back and forth. So that means trade. Keep going. Not trading goods, guys. They're aiming at each other, causing devastation, causing deaths. The British ships eventually backed out of range of the fort's cannon and bombarded it with rockets cannon and mortar fire for over a day, right? For 25 hours, the British ships back out of range. What does that mean? To back out of range is to step out of the way, not to back up in battle, but to keep firing forward. So they're going to back up. So they're out of range from the Americans at this fort. Pretty sneaky, right? So you back up. It's as if you, let's say, if you've ever played some kind of game where, you depending on what it is, where you may step back. Let's say if you're with playing with water guns, let's say during the summer, and one friend is to the side and they're able to aim at the other and really squirt them with water, right? Lighthearted moment. In that sense, which the battle, of course, wasn't, but the person is squirting the other one because they're out of range, and the other person is not able to squirt them back because they cannot get them at that angle. That's exactly what happened here. The British ships back out of range. They're able to fire cannons, rockets, fire, mortar fire, and the Americans are not expecting it because they're not able to bombard back right away. So it's going to continue for 25 hours. So it's a full day and an hour extra, right? 24 hours in a day. So it's a furious night of bombardment. You can see the image on the left, just bombing continuously. The sun would rise in the morning of September 14th to find an oversized American flag still waving above the fort. So right here, you're going to see a huge American flag that is still waving above the fort. Okay, and what does that show? That shows that there's no defeat. There's no white flag that the U.S. is giving up, but this is a big American flag, one of the biggest American flags the British have ever seen. What does that show? That shows great strength and great might in the Americans. They're not giving up, okay? They're not giving up. Here's this flag to show we are continuing to stand tall. The British fired an estimated 1,800 cannonballs. Think about that for a moment, guys. Almost 2,000 cannonballs at Fort McHenry. And the British give up their attack, and they sail back to the sea to regroup. So the Americans didn't retreat here, okay? But the British, they give up, and they sail back out to the sea to regroup. Some of you I hope you've heard of the Star Spangled Banner, the song before. Some of you may have sung that when you're younger. But on the right-hand side, there is the flag, okay? There is the flag that was standing tall in this fort. And this here is known as the original Star Spangled Banner. When I took 8th grade friends last year to Washington, some of our great friends were able to see this flag. And take a look at it. It went through this great battle. And plus the age of this flag, it's been preserved for many years. It's under a dim lighting. And during this time, what was the Star Spangled Banner on the left here? But during this time, an American citizen named Francis Scott Key. Some of you may have heard the name, especially singers, music friends. Francis Scott Key was being held on one of the British ships. So Francis Scott Key is on one of these British vessels during the battle. And he sees this American flag, right? Through all the smoke and cannon fire and smog, he sees this American flag on the morning of September 14th. And he's on this ship, obviously not knowing what's to come, but it inspires him at that moment, right, to begin writing in defense of Fort McHenry. So in defense of Fort McHenry is going to be known as the Star Spangled Banner. The Star Spangled Banner, guys, is our national anthem. National anthem. And what's important to know here is during a time of great devastation, you have this individual who's going to write a song to show the pride of the Americans, the strength of the Americans, and it's going to be eventually known as our national anthem. It's pretty interesting to know this set to the tune of an English drinking song from the time period as well. And we're going to discuss this a little bit further too. But that's essential to keep in mind, that the American spirit the American might have been, you know, attempted. It's almost attempted to be taken down, but that American spirit, that American might is not going to be taken down. Instead, they're going to continue to persevere, to push forward, and show great strength. And now we're going to end with one more. I'm going to introduce to you Andrew Jackson. It's not the first time or the last time you will hear of our great friend. If you look in your wallet, if you're lucky, you might see a $20 bill. That's Andrew Jackson. And when I say our great friend, I'll put in quotes because we're going to learn a little bit about him deeper in history. So who was Andrew Jackson on the left-hand side? First time we'll talk about him. So who was Andrew Jackson on the left-hand side? He's born in South Carolina, and he lives in Tennessee. He's known as one big, tough guy, one big, tough character in American history. That's why they call him tough as Old Hickory. Old Hickory, like a tree, strong, right? He's there to stay. He's very tough on his men, okay? He's not president yet, right? But he's going to be extremely, extremely tough on his men during this war, during the war. And he's going to, he executed once, he killed a militiaman for not being obedient, to not follow along, right? And if you watch the religion video carefully, you'll see disobedience is not following order. So once a militiaman didn't follow his order, he killed them. And that's the type of toughness he displayed during this war. Again, another individual who is going to be a great general of war, but also a future president. Not yet, though. Not yet, guys. Andrew Jackson had been commanding the militia, Tennessee militia, against the Creek Indians for a while here. The Creeks were inspired by Tecumseh, Tecumseh, whom had passed in the previous battle. So these natives, they learned the Creeks, right? That's what they're called. They learned that determination, learned a lot of skill and layout of land from Tecumseh. And Andrew Jackson is going to command several small battles throughout the war, nothing big yet. Eventually he defeats the Creek Nation in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in March of 1814. It's seen as a massacre because 800 out of 1,000 Red Sticks are killed. So 80% of the natives during that battle are killed. It's quite devastating. Okay, and then the Treaty of Fort Jackson, it's a treaty, forced the Creeks west. So it's a treaty. It's called the Treaty of Fort Jackson. It forced the Creeks west into what is now Alabama. And it's the Indian removal of the South all of a sudden beginning. It's not the first time you're going to hear about the Indian removal from the South. It's not the first time. It's not the last time we're going to hear about this. And it's not the last time you're going to hear about Andrew Jackson's part with it. Please upload these notes. Take a look at the question. Let me know if you have any questions. Keep with it. Keep moving forward. And until next time, we're exploring and we'll keep learning. So keep moving forward. And if you explore closely, you may find Andrew Jackson close by. Maybe one, maybe two. Have a great day. Take care and keep reviewing. Goodbye.